All right. I'm here with Des, and she's talking to me about the Affordable Care Act, and this will be a soundtrack only. And why are the Koch brothers spending money to see that the Affordable Care Act carries on and is not repealed and replaced by the Trump administration?
Is that your question?
That is my question.
All right. Well, I want to go back further. I want to go back to why it was so important for the United States Incorporated to get people to sign up for something, anything. They had to find the biggest possible dragnet to appeal to the largest possible population with the idea of scooping up as many of the younger generations as possible. They're really not interested in the people that are 67 and over, because those people are on their way out. They want everybody who's younger. And the reason that they want everybody that's younger is because of the duality of what you perceive to be as your government, which goes back to common law and admiralty law and UCC code, which is Uniform Commercial Code, which is a corporate set of rules that has come to be known as the law as it stands of the United States of America. And so essentially what it boils down to is there are too many people who are aware of this duality and have checked themselves out of the corporate code system and put themselves back on the land.
Is that like sovereign citizen movement?
Yes. Well, you can't be a sovereign citizen. You can be a sovereign. There's no such thing as a sovereign citizen, because by definition, if you're a citizen, you're not sovereign. So there's these layers of perceptions that's going on, and that's why so many sovereign movements have gotten themselves into deep trouble, and these guys end up in prison because they haven't been able to peel back enough layers, go back far enough to establish themselves as a person. And so they're still operating as a straw man, trying to cash in on their birth certificate, because essentially at the end of the day, mankind has one overwhelming flaw, and that is greed. And everybody's been pushed into a corner. And trying to get out of that corner, so as you know, the Affordable Health Care Act was passed as a tax. That's the only way that they could do it, because otherwise it's unlawful. And there's these huge penalties if you don't sign up for it. And of course, it's most attractive to families, to people that have children, and to people in their mid-30s and 40s. What they were trying to do is make it as attractive as possible for people in their 20s, later 20s, while penalizing people, putting the incentives in there for penalties for everybody, to give the early 20-somethings the chance to wrap their heads around the fact that there was going to be a penalty. Because in your early 20s, you still have student debt, you may or may not be married, you may or may not have children, and you may be willing to suck up the penalty because your health may still be good and you don't have all of these costs of having a family. So they built in, a 5 to 10 year window where they could drag net enough people within 10 years into it. And of course, 10 years later, those kids that were 10 years at the start would now be 20, and it would the mentality would be grandfathered in. And the premise of this is get everybody's signature, because when you have applied your signature to this paper, you have re-established yourself as a debt slave to the United States Incorporated. That's what it is. Because if you are aware of the sovereign movement and you're aware of the issues around the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence as being there's sort of two schools of thought. There's in academia, okay. The one is that the Constitution is something that relates to the United States. It's for all of its people. in perpetuity. And then there's the other group that says we're not a party to the Constitution. It was for the people whose signatures appear on the document. So there's kind of those two. And somewhere in there is a camp on both sides that say the Constitution is outdated, the Constitution needs to be revamped, and those are the people that you need to be frightened of, because they don't have a de facto argument in favor of the two main camps. Their prerogative is to entice everybody anew into a contract, to overcome the debate on both sides.
Can I ask you quickly, when this act of signing and acknowledging the ACA, right, that you're involved in it,
yes,
is that the little checkbox that you sign and you sign on your 1040?
Yes.
Okay, that's the physical mechanism. That's where you sign, and that's where it sucks in.
Right, that makes you responsible for paying taxes on your labor. Now, labor tax was never supposed to be a tax on labor. And if you go through all of the IRS documents and you go through all of the congressional records, there is nowhere where it says specifically that they're enacting a tax on labor. There is no labor tax. That is something, again, where you look at the IRS code, and of course remember that the Internal Revenue Service is not an arm of the federal government. It's a private company that is solicited on behalf of the United States Incorporated.
Really?
Yes. Internal Revenue Service is an arm of the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve is a private entity. It does not belong to the federal government. The Federal Reserve is an arm of the International Monetary Fund, and the International Monetary Fund is an arm of the United Nations.
What is the advantage that the Koch brothers see that will put money into their pocket?
Look at their history. You know, we talk about the Rothschilds, we talk about the Rockefellers, and we talk about George Soros.
Yeah.
Now, the Koch brothers are to America what George Soros is to the whole world. Agent provocateurs.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, what advantage? How are they making money by having the
look what their
ACA
investments
continue?
are. Their investments are the entire healthcare industry. And healthcare is health management. It's not care. They care to manage your health. They're not interested in preventative medicine. They're interested in managing your symptoms for as much as they possibly can. That's what management systems are. Department of Health and Human Services is human services, and that's what they're in the business of, managing the services of humanity.
And
their illnesses, their symptoms, their medicines.
And here, I thought the Kochs were in the oil business.
They are in the oil business, so they have to make capital. They have to keep increasing their liquidity in order to invest more, in order to do more damage. You know the old adage, money begets money?
Yes.
Well, that's exactly that. So the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers.
So it's a horizontal integration or expansion as opposed to a vertical integration.
Yes, if you want to look at it that way. But remember, also.
Hey, I'm just trying to get a grasp on what you've said. Okay.
On each of those horizontal platforms, you have myriad vertical platforms of intersecting interest. So you can think of them all as a round table, a horizontal round table of vested interest, and then coming off of that vertically are all these infrastructures that they've put in place. And so then all you got to do is connect the dots between all of those vertical infrastructures And then you create a 3D model, and you can see how interconnected everything is. And it is. It's hopelessly entwined on every level. And remember that the oil industry and the pharmaceutical industry fueled each other. In other words, if you go back to the original German land barons and factory owners in the last century, so you had all these German companies and factories that went out as part of the Crown holdings, not just the UK Crown holdings, but the Germans, the Swedes,
the Austrian,
the
Bavarian, German,
the Dutch East India Company and its affiliated holdings around the known empire at the time, conquering lands and putting crown flags on lands to own those resources. Well, look at the Germans. They went out, they were dyes and rubber. So they went out, and that's where they started with their money. That's where their money investments grew exponentially, horrifically, at an incredible rate. If you look at the early slave ships, they were not coming to the United States. The early slave ships were coming from Africa and were going to the West Indies and were going to Europe to feed plantations, factories, and very concentrated enterprises there, including all the islands, which were all crown holdings. So tea, spices, rubber plants, cotton, tobacco, all of these things that made money. And what did the first pharmaceutical companies were a result of a growth industry in dyes and early pharmaceuticals, opium, and flowed essentially from there. So the first oil companies were fueling those industries, locomotive trains, and then cars, and kept growing. And today, if you look at pharmaceutical industries, they're hopelessly entwined with crop science. And
with what?
What are the companies? With crop science. So GMO crops.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the original pharmaceutical companies were birthed out of chemical industries. Chemical industries got their start at the beginning of our First World War, and it just didn't stop ever. Everything that's chemotherapy today was developed as a war weapon, a chemical war weapon for the First World War, for the Second World War, and then morphed itself into new applications. Now, as chemotherapy drugs. Now, they're morphing chemotherapy drugs into another line of antibiotics against so-called super strains of bacteria.
MRSAs.
In light of everything we know about feedlot farming and the antibiotic investment in livestock. An enormous percentage of produced antibiotics feeds our food chain. It doesn't even feed humans, but it's human-grade antibiotics. And that's given rise to this enormous platform of super-resistant bugs and pathogens, while simultaneously we're vaccinating our entire population's immune system into oblivion. And remember, those vaccines carry not only contaminants, but carry biological warfare agents that are injecting future cancer platforms into our population
really?
For built-in profit margins for the healthcare industry, which Koch brothers are invested in, and which they definitely are uber invested in having the political platform be as happy as possible. They want to take care of their political platform, as long as the political platform supports their investment strategy. And so the political platform is a vested interest for all the parties playing this game.
So they're not real happy with the GOP at this point in time trying to...
No.
That's interesting. Okay, so to sum up, the ACA, which is under attack from the current administration and the Republican Congress is actually a mark of the beast.
Well, it is, and it really doesn't matter, Larry. It doesn't matter whether they repeal Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, or whether they manage to roll out a new one. What it is arguing semantics. And that's all. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant whether they make any changes or not. The deed is done. By signing up for it, you're under contract to the United States government as a corporation, and you put yourself back under their jurisdiction, and you are liable for personal income tax, and you have given them permission to own your body, just as when you have a baby and you send away for the birth certificate. It's processed through the Births and Deaths Registry Office. They take that live hospital birth certificate and they turn it into a bond instrument. And then they send you a certificate of ownership. And that certificate of ownership is issued through the state in which the baby is born. And that's how family court owns the children of any union, is all through the registered birth certificate. And that's the birth of the straw person. So that's what they've done, is they've essentially just reiterated and reestablished their ownership of their debt slave market human resource.
Okay, so my next question, which is far afield of the ACA, is they are basically the crew that put together the Federal Reserve in 1913. Is that correct?
It's the banking cartel, and it's the British accredited registry of barristers, attorneys, and lawyers. Those are the only people that are actually involved in any of this. Those are the same people that were willing to and were pushing for the Trans-Pacific Pact and all the global economic trade incentive packages.
TPP, TIPP.
Exactly, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Pick any of them. Any of those that did pass, any of those that were proposed, and any of those that have fallen away. Obama, tried very hard before he left to get that one put in place, and was unsuccessful. But it really doesn't matter, because the system has designated itself. The system is a self-proselytizing and a self-fulfilling entity that is incredibly hungry, and the only way that it can exist is by being continuously fed. And that system of feeding is through trade agreements, through alliances, through contracts. And so it all comes down to money, finances, and legalese. And there are only two entities in charge of that. And that's the banking cartel and the British Accredited Registry of Barristers, Attorneys, and Lawyers. So you will look at the United States government. Everybody has all the heads of agencies. It doesn't matter. Pick any acronym agency. The head and the superintendents and the advisors and all the lead people are all attorneys. All of them. They're the only ones that can run those departments, because those departments can only be run in the legalese, in the word craft, the word smithing of the legalese trickfuckery, because no one else knows what it means.
Wow. I feel really ignorant, but I feel as if I've been set on a path of discovery. So that's got it. We're pretty well wrapped. Again, to sum up, the Kochs are invested in healthcare as well as petroleum and toilet paper and everything else that they're into, and to protect their capital investments in their healthcare cash flow. They are continuing to lobby and direct the legislative process away from single payer, no matter what. Is that?
No matter what. No matter what, because
that's correct summation.
Yes, because the healthcare industry isn't just the front end of you walking in to see a doctor or you going into a hospital, but it's all the associated industries. So it's the pharmaceuticals, it's the companies that make the machinery that's used in hospitals for surgery, imaging, CT scans. I mean, you name it, right down to bandages, needles, medical equipment,
the $6 aspirin,
uniforms. Including the restaurant services that have to, the kitchens that have to feed patients, nursing unions, their health insurance, their labor unions, their union dues, doctors' unions, medical school, private practice insurance. You look at the Koch brothers; they're involved in all the different tiers of insurance of all of these different divisions.
The vertical integration that actually stretches to the stratosphere.
Exactly. That's why I say you can imagine it as a big round table, a real horizontal platform, but you've got to be able to look at it as a three-dimensional image and just see exactly where it all goes.
Yeah. All right. Des, you are, as always, a wealth of information and a source of clarity, and JusticeNewsNetwork.com appreciates your participation in our education.
Thank you, Larry.
All right.